In the Peruvian Andes, at a height of 3.5 thousand meters, one can find Cusco. The city immediately fascinates with its universe of narrow streets built back during the times of the Incas, by the tenebrous architecture of the colonial period, by the colorful Indian garments, and the mass of tourists who come here from all over the world to get closer to the mysteries of our history. In Cusco, everything reminds you of the Incas, the founders of the city, the ancient walls made of the thoroughly polished boulders, the language of Quechua used by the Incas centuries ago, the seven-colored flag of Tawantinsuyu, the flag of the Incan Empire that is now flying in the wind in the central square of the city, next to the flag of the Republic of Peru. According to legend, Cusco was founded by the elder son of the messenger of the sun god, Manco Capac, who came to this place with his sister wife, Aclio, to bring people the laws of civilization, to help them liberate themselves from ignorance, poverty, and aggression. To him belongs the first commandment of the state: don't lie, don't steal, don't be lazy. This commandment and such an approach allowed the creation of a highly organized society, the Inca Empire, which ruled over millions of people and stretched for thousands of kilometers from Ecuador to Chile. The lost civilization has left a lot of unresolved mysteries. The Incas did not have their own script and therefore left no written records, and so whatever we know about them comes from the chronicles of the Spanish conquerors. One of such mysteries is the Incan architecture. It is believed that the majority of the various Incan sites and constructions were built within less than 1 century. Even today, these constructions inspire awe and admiration among both the historians and the architects, as well as among the multiple tourists. Among these are the sites of Ollantaytambo, the terraces of Pisac, the laboratory in Moray, the famous flying city of Machu Picchu, the temples and palaces of Cusco, and many others. However, some scholars believe that the Incas did not construct all of these themselves, but simply took over the sites that were already built and used them for their own benefit. At the high hill in the northern suburb of Cusco, there is the famous Sacsayhuaman, probably one of the most striking mysteries of architecture. This is what Garcilaso de la Vega wrote about in his Comentarios Reales de los Incas in the 17th century. It's impossible to imagine the proportions of this endeavor until you see it. After a laborious study and a close examination of the stones used in the construction, one can't help but believe that sorcery must have been involved in the construction process, so outstanding is the impression that they make. Could it really be demons who created it and not people? Sacsayhuaman consists of 3 layers of zigzag walls made of megaliths, large boulders weighing dozens or even hundreds of tons. Sacsayhuaman also encompasses a lot of other buildings and constructions that stretch along a vast territory. It is believed that the main construction job was done in the middle of the 15th century during the reign of Inca Pachacutec. Unfortunately, it is impossible to make a definite statement as to how the site looked like in ancient times. For the Spaniards who came here in the middle of the 16th century, the destruction of Sacsayhuaman was somewhat a symbol of the victory of the kingdom of God over paganism, of European civilization over Indian barbarism. The site was used not only as a source of the construction materials for the churches and the private mansions of Cusco, but was also subjected to a purposeful demolition. Only the megalithic walls remained in place, since the Spaniards were not able to destroy them. The precision and accuracy with which the boulders in the walls were fit to each other is mesmerizing, and it is considered by many people to be unrivaled even today. In the spots where the masonry was disturbed, one can see that it's impossible to squeeze a sheet of paper in between the boulders. Even more, it is impossible to even notice joint. The method of Sacsayhuaman's construction was perplexing not only for the medieval chroniclers. The above-mentioned Garcilaso de la Vega even wanted to notarize the size of the boulders so that people in the medieval Spain would believe his stories about Sacsayhuaman, but for the modern architects and archaeologists as well. For the latter, it remains unfathomed how it was possible to transport these blocks of stones and to fit them at such non-linear surfaces. The Incas knew no wheels, no draft animals, and there is no evidence of jack levers or any other devices facilitating the work with such heavy weights. By the time the Spaniards arrived there, the Incas were no longer building anything. In addition, the chronicles and legends in terms of the construction methods mentioned nothing else but manual labor, the magical assistance of the earth, and the wish of the stone to be transported. The walls were made of limestone fixed together by a method of drywalling, without any cement. At the destroyed parts of the walls, one can see the wall structure. First, there goes the lining. It was done by means of the high-quality polygonal masonry. Then there goes the inside filling, rows of roughly processed boulders and clay. The builders did not follow a common procedure where the installation of the heaviest megaliths would go first, while the filling of the wall with smaller stones would go second. One can see that the large megaliths, and these are the largest stones, rest on a foundation that was prepared in advance. For your information, the weight of the biggest cornerstone, according to some estimates, reaches around 300 tons. In addition, to reach such precision and accuracy of joints that the Sacsayhuaman has, one would have to do a multiple adjustment and a lot of finely calculated transportations of the stone blocks. Limestone is a solid but very fragile material that often has a very non-homogeneous structure that can split and crumble at the slightest obliqueness. It is not clear how these constructors could work with the vertically placed huge boulders of this weight with only the help of the primitive manual labor. The adjoining surfaces of the blocks often have a complicated three-dimensional relief. This may be good and efficient for the areas of high seismic activity that are not rare in this region. It allows the boulders to return to their fixed position in a natural way. The gypsum model demonstrates how stable such masonry is, even without any adhesive means. Many blocks have corrugations and hollows. Archaeologists believe that these were the lifting fixtures. However, many of these hollows have the shape of simple dents that are in no way suitable for utilization of any levers or crutches. Moreover, at the back side of the large boulders, which is usually not processed, there are often no hollows at all. In addition, the Incas did not possess any timber that could be suitable for producing such construction tools. The aromatic eucalyptus groves, nowadays bountiful and lush on the slopes of the local mountains, appeared here only in the 19th century. Further evidence that the ancient constructors had methods unknown to us comes from the positioning of the granite blocks in the Temple of the Sun in Ollantaytambo, 40 kilometers to the north of Cusco. These blocks were transported from the other side of the canyon, across the river, and were lifted up the narrow precipitous cliff. There even remains the megaliths which were abandoned on the way and which possess no signs of transportation tools. At the cliff itself, there is too little space to place the structures and the necessary number of people to manage this weight. Another mystery is how the stone blocks were installed and adjusted to each other at an almost precipitous cliff. At the top of the hill surrounded with the walls, there is one of the most amazing buildings in the Sacsayhuaman complex.
Nos encontramos en la parte alta del cerro de la fortaleza.
We are now standing at the top of the mountain where a fortress is erected. We can see a part of the building itself, as well as the remains of the walls and foundations. In description of the chroniclers Cieza de León, Sarmiento de Gamboa, and Garcilaso de la Vega, this is deemed to be the foundation for the three towers. Most likely this circle, Muyakmarca, was part of the House of the Sun, while the other two towers, called Pocasmarca and Sayakmarca, were located on each side. According to Cieza de León, what the Spaniards perceived as a fortress, namely these towers at the upper part of Sacsayhuaman, represented, in fact, a very big ritual complex dedicated to the sun. There was also built the Temple of Lightning, represented by the lines radiating from the towers. The other lower gods resided in other buildings: the Temple of the Rainbow, the Temple of the Moon and the Stars, which surrounded the House of the Sun. The purpose of Sacsayhuaman could be that of a big single complex where the Incas worshipped the sun. This construction was also believed to be the dwelling for the guardian gods, heavenly deities living in the material world.
Todos los dioses de la parte alta están expresadas en esta parte de la realidad concreta.
Beside this version, Sacsayhuaman being a ritual complex, there are plenty of other hypotheses, starting from simple domestic ones, a storage building for food, a water tower, a defensive fortress, and up to the most exquisite theories like Sacsayhuaman providing the influence to the earth through the telluric currents, or Sacsayhuaman being a generator of subtle energies which enable extraordinary powers, etc. Indeed, the construction is more reminiscent of a technological installation than a temple for worship. The rigid geometric shapes, the intricate system of water drainage in the western part of the tower, which by the way has an unclear purpose, the megalithic walls protecting the hill from destruction. The foundations are made of limestone. The walls are made from a more solid material, andesite, and its stones of largely rectangular shape are processed with high quality. The remnants of andesite stones can still be found in the area, and they are used for restoration of the complex. Sometimes the andesite blocks are also found inside the destroyed walls, but the archaeologists have no explanation as to this, except for an assumption that for the internal filling of the wall, the constructors used the remains of earlier buildings. Also, there are two entrances into the underground caves, both of which are bricked up for safety purposes. It was said that different people, mainly those who sought adventures or the lost treasures of the Inca, would often get lost or go insane in the tunnels. That is why in the 1920s, the local authorities decided to brick up the entrances into the caves. The intriguing caves sparked the interest of the georadar researchers who were working here in July 2012. Various tunnels and underground caves are not a rare thing in Peru. However, in the area of the Tower of Muyakmarca, which is believed to be the most likely location of the underground constructions, it appeared to be impossible to perform the georadar research due to the disturbances coming from the towers located in direct visibility. None of the underground buildings or their remainders were found around the walls, where rock fractures causing the deformation of the walls occurred. However, in the area of Lake Cocha and Mountain Chincana, the remainders of the underground constructions were discovered. One of them was interpreted by the experts as a sepulcher. Behind the hill, which is believed to be in fact just an extrusion, that is when a marshy lava squeezes out during an eruption, there is a large oval plaza, Cocha. Historians assume that it was an artificial reservoir. However, judging by its shape, it rather reminds of a big arena. The true purpose of the object is anyway unknown. At the edge of Cocha, there are the large rocks which seem to be chaotically piled up. No one can explain what was the mysterious force that brought them there. There's even a boulder leaning against a polygonal masonry wall. That means that some of the walls and ledges were evidently constructed here before the large stones appeared around. Scientists do not exclude the possibility that what they see are the remainders of a very ancient and big construction. A similar site exists in the place called Cayanca, located 2 kilometers from the complex. However, the size of those perfectly processed and seemingly chaotically scattered stones is less impressive. The topic of imported stones arose during the tour around the area several times. In the vicinity, there's a big rock, Chincana, that is famous for the large number of hollows on its surface. It is said that this is exactly the rock that the Incas attempted to move once many years ago. It is called the Tired Stone, and it killed thousands of Indians during its fall. When the stone fell down, it barred the entrance to a dungeon that was worshipped by the Incas. Hence, the Inca cut out a new entrance and steps in the mountain. Their remains are still well visible. It is hard to say what transportation technologies were used by the Incas when they were moving the rocks weighing several thousand tons, or even if it took place at all. But the separate stones or rocks, which originally were not from here, are also found in the neighborhood in the form of the huacas. A huaca is any site that the Incas associated with a manifestation of superior power. To them often belong the stones and rocks with the cuts on their surface. The Indian legends and the Spanish chronicles often give a detailed description of the interaction between the Indians and the natural forces via these huacas. This is what Garcilaso de la Vega wrote in his chronicles. It, the huaca, denotes a sacred object. Anything could be such an object. Anything through what the devil could speak to a person. Among huacas, there were idols, rocks, huge stones, or trees where the enemy of man penetrated, so that to make people believe that he was the god itself. The name huaca was also applied to any temple, be it a small or a large one, to the tombs in the fields, as well as to the corners inside the houses from which the devil spoke to the priests and other people who communicated with him in a friendly manner. Another chronicler of Indian origin, Goaman Poma, at the end of the 16th century wrote that through huacas, the Incas would come to know about the location of silver, gold, and other mines. This is what he wrote about some of the Incan kings. Tupac Inca Yupanqui could talk to huacas. From them, he would learn about the past and the future events of the whole world. Huayna Capac, one of the last sovereigns of the Incas, wanted to do the same, but huacas did not want to talk to him. It was said that only the idol of Pariacaca responded to him, and it told that there was little time left for the talks and for the reign of the Incas, since the people who bear the name of Viracocha were about to come to this land already during the reign of Huayna Capac, or straight after it, so that to rule on behalf of a single and great idol, which they would bring with them. The huacas surround Cusca all around. In this region, there are many rock formations or large rocks scattered around and densely covered with the various hollows made on a strongly eroded surface. The cutouts and hollows have very diverse shapes, from the most primitively processed hollows and up to the geometrically calibrated ones. No systematic approach is perceived in the staircase and rectangular cuts, although some of them could be used as benches or steps for a more convenient ascent to the hill. On the other hand, there is definitely a certain similarity between all wakas. All of them usually contain a rock with cuts. Wakas often have the following structure: multiple and mostly rectangular cuts and stairs, imposed in a rather chaotic manner. One or few well-processed walls with the bosses, the corrugations, a cave which is cut with high quality and containing several compartments, something like a grotto, and a small land plot or a stone processed in a different manner, with the images resembling snakes, animals, or the curved riverbeds. Often such wakas are adjacent to or surrounded with the smaller constructions of the polygonal masonry of different quality. Some wakas also have an evident connection to the various water drainage systems. For example, in Kayanka, there's a waka where the two outlets in the rock evidently served as the sources of water, and they are accompanied with the well-defined drains. Next to it, at a big rock covered with the cuts all over the surface, there is a picturesque winding watercourse. It's very hard to say what was the function of such a minuscule drain. The width of the watercourse is only a few centimeters. During the georadar research of Sacsayhuaman, there were collected the samples to be further examined in detail in Russian scientific research centers. In the course of that further examination, it appeared that the blocks mainly consisted of the fine crystalline limestone. The ancient constructors were obviously using a high-quality material. Some of the blocks could make a dinging sound when knocked. On the other hand, the larger stones often possessed various faults and a rather non-homogeneous structure, which is normal for natural formations. The raw material for the walls was most likely taken directly at the construction sites, since the limestone in the crag near the tower has the same structure as the limestone in the blocks. At the surface of Sacsayhuaman stones, the traces of processing and hammering can be clearly seen. These are the small hollows with slight defects in them as a result of hammering. The majority of the blocks in Sacsayhuaman are covered with such markings. Such tracks appear after thumping against the limestone, which is the raw material for the walls, with something more solid. We can see that the constructors were using different tools to process the more fine details. The dots at the blocks become smaller and denser by the stone's edges. Having conducted the experiments on processing at a nearby natural stone, we had no more doubts as to this type of processing had been applied. There are commonly known legends about the Indians making the stones soft and malleable with the help of some liquid. During the experimental processing of a nearby stone, we attempted to apply vinegar. Vinegar dissolves limestone, but it would be ineffective for all other formations. After we rinsed the surface with water, it became clear that the effect was different from that visible at the stone blocks all over the place. This method is neither suitable for a precise fixing of stones to each other.
Все. Ну, не то чтобы очень ровная поверхность, но приблизительно вот.
Together with the hammering, there was another method of processing applied. It is a more refined one, but it is yet not known to us. The adjoining surfaces are often abrasive. This allows to have the minimum clearance at the joints, only fractions of millimeters. Nevertheless, this does not explain how one can achieve such accuracy with big megaliths consisting of solid yet fragile material, as the local limestone is, where the surface of one block is almost an identical copy of the surface of another adjoining block. Even the Spaniards acknowledged the elegance of the outlines of the processed stones and the multiplicity of the small and precisely implemented details at the blocks of all sizes. When evaluating the accuracy of joints, it is worth noting the megalith of Ollantaytambo granite is a more solid material than the limestone of Sacsayhuaman. This raw material demonstrated the pinpoint accuracy of processing and joining. Nowadays, we use rather complex devices to achieve such results. But the Incas did not possess accurate metering devices. They used only the most primitive methods of construction and the stone tools. Up until now, the debates continue as to how the ancient constructors could achieve such accuracy. Very often, a hypothesis is expressed about the softening of the stone and converting the material of the blocks into a more malleable state. There exist even more exotic hypotheses. It was often observed that the masonry structure of the walls resembled to a live material. Besides that, the Incas themselves believed the stone to be alive. There also exist many legends about the buildings arising out of nowhere in an unfathomable and mysterious way during just one night. The builders used not only the primitive hammering. While the white dots are the traces of the hammering tool, then the other tracks, which are also well known to us, have no explanation. The archaeologist Luis Guevara demonstrated a whole collection of the various and mysterious tracks of an unknown tool. These tracks are unique. Their quality is small as compared to the total volume of the processed stones. However, it is clear that the majority of these tracks were destroyed with time. This is what Luis Guevara tells about such traces in the cave of one of the huacas in the suburb of Cusco.
Estamos ubicados en el templo llamado Chestacaca.
We are in the temple of Chictacaca. The chroniclers have not much information about this huaca, and as of today, the site is under exploration. We are trying to figure out the purpose of this huaca. During the solstice, the sun illuminates the cave from the inside. All of this space, all of this wall has been processed. The assumption is that it was prepared to be afterwards covered with gold. An unusual tool was used to achieve this result. The elegance and the accuracy of which the surfaces and the steps are done is amazing. I'm not sure if the Incas possessed any tool which could provide such a result. The horizontal surface facing the floor is so smooth that it rather suggests that some soft, moldable material was cut with a device similar to a knife, with the thickness of the razor being only 2 to 3 millimeters. A similar track is found at a diorite rock opposite to the megalithic walls of Sacsayhuaman. Here, a big piece of rock was separated from the main mass by a cut several meters long. and many similar traces are available in Ollantaytambo. At the mountain Inca, there is a famous platform that has a perfectly smooth and polished wall and a fluted floor. The cuts were made by a tool resembling a modern hatchet applied for plastic materials, with the width of the razor around 2 millimeters. Cuts are made along the line, but in a rather negligent manner, not caring too much about their accuracy and similarity of the cells. The tool sometimes crosses the furrow from one edge to the other. Close to it, there's another interesting processed land site. It is treated with the same method, 2 cuts inside of each deepening. The site represents 4 regular diamonds traversed by a hollow going around the rock shelf. However, even more unusual traces are available. In Sacsayhuaman, at the western side of the Lake Cocha, there's an amazing stone, the processing style of which is significantly different from all other stones in the area. The surface erosion is normal for limestone, but at the same time, if we look at it more attentively, we can see that the traces of processing in this case resemble more of a ductile plastic material processing, unless the constructors were trying to imitate such treatment with the help of the lapidary technologies only. Such traces can be easily made with fingers on the unhardened clay. However, next to it, there's a figurine produced in a definitely conventional way.
You can see this. This is the arm, one arm, the head, and your body. It's body, yeah. You know, similar to snakes. You know?
Or maybe lizard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lizard.
Lizards. Yeah, lizards.
Along the whole perimeter of the stone, there's a shelf at which the traces of cuts and grinding can be observed very well. The shelf transforms into a snake-like formation, which the archaeologists actually consider to be the representation of 2 snakes looking at each other. Again, the tool and the method of such treatment are not known. However, it is hard to shake the impression that these are the consequences of treating a ductile material, especially since at another side of the stone there exist the traces of tapping or hammering. These traces can be seen distinctly. They were obviously done later and have no relation to the mentioned wavy surface of its production. One can also see the signs of a sort of blurring of the material with the subsequent hammering of it. One could assume that part of these traces appeared on the stone during the decoration of the stone with golden jewelry, but it is still very difficult to understand what was the purpose of the constructors being so thorough with imitating the ductile material treatment. A similar trace is available at the stone in the wall. In Kenko, there's a place where the limestone looks exactly like a frozen puddle. However, it's a matter of common knowledge that under the usual conditions, it is impossible to melt down limestone. When heated, limestone loses its features and transforms into quicklime. There's even a more surprising discovery. During the excavations of 2008, performed next to the complex called the Temple of the Moon, there was discovered an interesting artifact. Its main value is in the fact that the tracks of processing were not subjected to erosion. It is hard to imagine a tool that could leave such tracks. Such a result cannot be achieved neither by etching, nor by scraping, and still less by hammering. The only parallel that comes to mind that these could be the tracks of a heated spear applied to an easily meltable material. In summary, I would like to mention one more discovery that is directly related to the treatment of stones. On Incan, the mountain that was already mentioned, there was discovered an image resembling a form of writing. At first, this was perceived as ordinary vandalism by the tourists, since it was done with white paint. However, Having conducted a more thorough examination, and especially after pouring water on this part of the rock, it appeared that the writing was rather old, and although made in a rather careless way, it looked like the equations written on the blackboard with chalk. It was a surprise to unveil that the white paint had nothing to do with the writing, since the writing was done with an unknown method similar to etching. The writing, in fact, is represented with the whitish crystalline formations incorporated into the stone structure. Unfortunately, it was impossible either to get a scraping or the samples of the writing, since it would lead to the partial destruction of the writing. In the area of Muyakmarka, the tower that we've mentioned, the archaeologists pointed out an andesite stone block with an ornament on it. Its structure and style reminded those of the crystalline writing in Incan. Nothing of the kind had ever been found before, and that is why there has been no success yet with the deciphering of the writing. Although it is evident that these writings have a direct relation to the ancient constructors. However, the Incas had no script. To store the information, they used kippa, a system of measurement based on the nodules and braiding of the laces. At the same time, we know nothing of how the Incas designed their constructions, wherefrom they received their knowledge, how they transferred it further. We also understand little about their mindset and world outlook. We know very little about those who were considered to be the sorcerers, the priests, and about the mysterious amota, the philosophers and scientists without whom the Inca sovereigns did not make any important decisions. So, who are they, these ancient constructors of Sacsayhuaman, who were capable of doing things which are beyond explanation in our modern civilized world? The conquistador Don Manso Serra de Leguizamo, the last one of those who were the first ones to conquer Peru, wrote the following about the Incan sovereigns. We found these states in a very good condition. The mentioned Incas were governing them so wisely that among these people there were no thieves, neither vicious men, nor unfaithful wives, no immoral people. Everyone had their honest and useful professions. They knew no crime or execution. Everyone had their own property, and not a single other person would claim it. What urges me to write about this now is my consciousness. Since I feel guilty, we've destroyed all of this by our vicious and mean example. We've eliminated the nation that had such sovereigns and that was so happy.